Hello, everybody. Professor Barth here, Associate Professor of History at Arizona State University. Welcome to a dollar report. It's been a long time coming. I think the last one I made was in September of 2023, so lots to report on. Of course, as all of you have probably heard by this point, pretty bad inflation report yesterday. Here's from the New York Times. Inflation was hotter than expected in March. Unwelcome news for the Fed. It's just not going away. It is, as the Times says here, surprisingly stubborn. Why is that? Well, the underlying fundamentals. Just, again, bad COVID policy from the Federal Reserve and the federal government back in 2020. And, I mean, remember, the giant, enormous expansion in the money supply and the Fed's balance sheet in the spring of 2020, and then QE, quantitative easing, did not even end until early 2022. And then once the tightening cycle began, it was too little, too late. And it appears perhaps the federal funds rate, they stopped at 5.5%. Is that high enough? The numbers would suggest perhaps not. And so this is bad news overall for the Federal Reserve and for the Biden administration. Here's a CPI year over year. Of course, it's down from the peak in July of 2022 when it peaked at 9%. But remember, the target range is 2%, and it's just not getting down to that level. Here's month-over-month CPI zooming in at price movements across the month, and yeah, it's down a bit from the peaks in late 2021 and in 2022, but still high. And then you look at core CPI, and remember, core excludes food and energy. Those tend to be a little more volatile sectors. And so core really gives you a good reading of how prices are across the board. Core CPI, do you see much movement here? Yeah, a little bit. Again, from the peak in 2022, but core CPI is still pretty bad. Definitely a lot higher than it was in early 2021. And then you look at month over month core. How did prices move month over month in the economy, excluding food and energy? I don't see much of a change here at all from even 2022. Maybe 2022 is barely higher month over month core. But this is, I'll tell you this, the Federal Reserve did not expect core CPI to remain this high after taking up interest rates to, what was it? Was that 5.5%? I mean, it's been many, many years since it's been that high. This was not in the cards for the Federal Reserve. Now, if you were watching my dollar report, we were talking about this very possibility that this is it's not enough, that inflation would continue, and that has indeed been the case. I mean, look at this. This is, from November 2022 to last month. There's core CPI hasn't gone down at all month over month. It's remained again stubbornly persistent. Meanwhile, gold is going berserk. Look at that. For the longest time, it was just hovering around $2,000, even a little less than $2,000, and bam! We're at over $2,300 an ounce. Silver, I know there's a lot of fans of silver in this audience. I like silver. Look at silver, $28. Since the beginning of the year, silver is up 20%. And then Bitcoin, woo! Red hot. Bitcoin, since the beginning of the year 2023, is up 300%, right around $70,000. Wow. Well, what about these prices? Well, we won't go through them all, of course, but a couple things that stood out to me. Gasoline last month, just in the month alone, went up 6.5%. I mean, I was driving to campus this morning, $4.50 a gallon. And then, I mean, this really, like, what is going on here? Since this time last year, motor vehicle maintenance and repairs up over 8%. Have you gotten your car repaired lately? I have. It's break the bank. And then this one's really nuts. Motor vehicle insurance is up over 20% since this time last year. I mean, you all have noticed that every 6 months, at least for me, I renew my insurance, and it just keeps climbing up and up. I haven't gotten in any wrecks. What's going on? So these are all problems. But I'll tell you, one of the things I wanted to highlight in this video today, I was just curious, how have prices moved since Biden became president? Now, in fairness to the president, it's the Federal Reserve that's in charge of monetary policy, but the federal government, including the president, still has a lot of authority over fiscal policy, and that influences inflation. But let's just take a look at how prices have moved under Biden's administration since January of 2021 all the way up through last month. It's going to startle you, I think, taking a look at some of these numbers. Check this out. Food, since Biden became president, is up 21%. Food prices up 21%. That includes meat, poultry, fish, eggs. Dairy products are up 15%. Cereals and bakery products are up 25%. Fruits and veggies up 14%. Oh, but we continue. Energy prices are up 39%. You're like, Barth, where'd you get all this data from? Just Bureau of Labor Statistics, the CPI reports. I looked at the report in January 2021. I looked at the report in March. The latest report, did the calculation. This is what you've got. 39% increase in energy prices since Biden became president. Think that might have something to do with energy policy? Gasoline is up 48%. 48%. Electricity is up 29%. Natural gas is up 27%. This is a killer for American families. And then you just go down the line. Apparel, clothing is up 13%. I guess medical care services is giving us a little bit of a break here, up only 7%. New vehicles, 19% price increase. Used cars and trucks, up 21%. Motor vehicle maintenance and repair, up 30%. Motor vehicle insurance, since Biden became president, up 50%. 50%. Airline fares up 33%. Shelter, that's your rent, your cost of your home, 21% increase. Just in this presidential term alone, and we're not even done with this first term. You take a look at the whole CPI, and it's 19% increase in prices. 19%. If you take a look at core is 18%. You're like, oh yeah, but Barth, wages have gone up. Well, wages have gone up 15%. This is from the St. Louis Fed. They have all this. They accumulate all this data. Average hourly earnings for all employees across the board in the U.S. The average earning was $30 an hour when Biden became president. Now it's $34.50 an hour. That's a 15% increase. Well, 15% is less than 19%, isn't it? So what does that mean? Let me translate it for you. It means that real earnings have gone down. Real earnings have gone down. You're getting hit in the pocketbook. And then I was like, what was it under Trump? Let's take a look at the numbers under Trump. Under Trump, hourly earnings also rose 15%. Isn't that interesting? So we have an equality here, nominally. At the beginning of his administration, the average was $26 an hour. By the end, it was $30. That's a 15% increase. Oh, but prices went up 8% under his administration. Translation, your real earnings went up under Trump's administration. You want to know why Trump is up in the polls right now? One of the reasons, not the only reason, but one of the reasons is people remember this, and people are struggling under this. Okay? Just giving you the fact. Don't hate the messenger. So, now, meanwhile, the media is, all the people in New York City and LA are, lecturing Americans. Oh, Americans are too stupid to realize that the economy is actually doing great. The economy is great right now. What do they mean by that? Well, the Dow's doing very well. Look at this. It's up 25% since Biden became president. I mean, it's about to hit 40,000. The Dow's doing well. Well, yeah, but does your average American trade in stocks? No, they don't. Many Americans have, a 401k, and so yes, many Americans are tied into the stock market, their retirement, whatever, but they don't trade in stocks on anything approaching a regular basis. And so for them, this is not improving their standard of living in any immediate way. And then the media will point to the 15% increase in hourly earnings. Yeah, but that's less than what the inflation rate was. So that means real earnings are down. But I think what this tells you is that looking at these numbers, this is a 1% economy, meaning this economy is benefiting the 1%. So that's the media primarily inhabit that world, and so from their perspective, things are great. Things are great. They can't understand why Americans don't see that things are doing great economically. The average American, however, knows that their real wages, their real earnings are down. They see those, the price of energy, especially, but just prices across the board are way up. And then they look at the interest rate, borrowing cost is way, has skyrocketed. Look at that. There's the prime rate in the banking system, 8.5%. Just 2 years ago, it was 3.25%. Yeah. So it's expensive to borrow money. And in fact, actually, the last time we had a prime rate even approaching this level was in 2006, 2007. I was like 22, 23 years old. I'm 40 now. That was the last time that we had that borrowing was this expensive. And then your 30-year fixed rate mortgage is right there around 7%. So it's more expensive to own a home. So, your average American looks at this, and for many Americans, this is a loser economy. And you can tell them all day, point, to the stock market all you want, but they know, they know that this economy is not working for them. And so that's going to be a real challenge for President Biden going into the general election. Well, what about the federal funds rate? Right now we're sitting at an upper limit of 5.5%. Remember, it was just 2 years ago that we were at a quarter. Okay, so, but the Fed's made it clear they don't intend to raise it any higher than 5.5%. Well, if inflation continues to remain at these, this stubbornly high level, what other choice are they going to have? They certainly can't begin cutting rates, at least not yet. You zoomed out a little bit, the federal funds rate since 2015, just to give you a picture of how high these interest rates have gotten compared to previous years. Powell, Fed chair, said this in a press conference in March last month. This is prior to the latest CPI release. We believe that our policy rate is likely at its peak for this tightening cycle, so it's not going to go higher than 5.5%. And that if the economy evolves broadly as expected, it will likely be appropriate to begin dialing back policy restraint at some point this year. Translation, there will likely be some rate cuts. The economic outlook is uncertain, however, and we remain highly attentive to inflation risk. This is an important caveat, considering the fact that he said this prior to the latest CPI report. We are prepared to maintain the current target range for the federal funds rate for longer if appropriate. Well, I think yesterday's report makes that a lot more likely. We know that reducing policy restraint too soon or too much could result in a reversal of the progress we've seen on inflation and ultimately require even tighter policy to get inflation back to 2%. This happened in the 1970s. The Fed under Arthur Burns cut rates too soon, and inflation just like a beach ball went right back up. And so that's what Powell is warning about here. And this is so important, hence the bold type. The committee does not, meaning the FOMC, does not expect it will be appropriate to reduce the target range until it has gained greater confidence that inflation is moving sustainably down toward 2%. Well, we're not there. Actually, not even really close to being there. And so that really changes the calculation, what the Fed's going to do this year. The FOMC is not going to reduce the federal funds rate until it has gained, quote, greater confidence that inflation is moving sustainably down toward 2%. That's why the report yesterday was so impactful. Now, Powell informed the press at this conference that on average, the participants, the members of the Federal Open Market Committee, projected that the appropriate level of the federal funds rate will be 4.6% at the end of the year. Now, that would involve at least 3 rate cuts. I don't think we're going to get 3 rate cuts now. And in fact, different forecasters, initially people were forecasting that there would be a rate cut perhaps at the July meeting. Now they're saying maybe it won't come until September. And so the forecasts just keep adjusting with each and every month that inflation remains so stubbornly persistent. You take a look. This was from the New York Times, a graph that was on their website. 3 months ago, this was the projection of where rates would go. And with each and every month, forecasters have to adjust to, we're getting to a point now where you have to wonder, will there be a rate cut in 2024? Perhaps, maybe even likely, but will there be 3? That seems a lot less likely, especially after yesterday. These are the upcoming meetings of the FOMC in 2024. We've got one in May, another in June, July, September, November, December. There will be a lot of eyes on the Fed at these 2 meetings in particular because of the general election. General elections coming, and a rate cut could lead to a temporary, economic stimulus. It could serve as a temporary economic stimulus and help the current president over the finish line. So there's going to be a lot of scrutiny over the meetings, especially in July and September. There's the Fed's balance sheet. It has gone down about $1.5 trillion since the peak. This is because of quantitative tightening. The Fed has allowed I think up to 95 billion, my memory serves me correctly, of assets, primarily treasuries, but also mortgage-backed securities, to run off the balance sheet upon maturity. That's caused the Fed's balance sheet to go down, but it's still higher than it was even at the beginning of the QE cycle in the spring of 2020. That's gone down 17% overall since the peak in 2022. Powell addressed this as well. Is quantitative tightening going to end? Or is the Fed going to end its policy of allowing these securities to run off the balance sheet? And this is what he said. Turning to our balance sheet, our securities holdings have declined by nearly $1.5 trillion since the committee began reducing our portfolio. At this meeting, we discussed, meaning the March FOMC meeting, we discussed issues related to slowing the pace of decline in our securities holdings. While we did not make any decisions today on this, the general sense of the committee is that it will be appropriate to slow the pace of runoff fairly soon. So the pace of runoff, again, is quantitative tightening. It's been at the same spot for a while now. Are they going to slow the pace anytime soon? It may be appropriate to slow the pace fairly soon, but it's contingent on how the inflation numbers are, and they're not doing so well. So there's no telling. This impacts the bond market and the money markets in general. The 10-year Treasury's at more than 4.5%. The yield is more than 4.5%. Again, compare that to early 2021 when it was at 1%. What does this mean? It means that it's a lot more expensive for the federal government to borrow money. And in fact, interest payments on the national debt are really beginning to soar, and will very soon surpass even defense spending. So that's this dollar report. It had been a while since I did a report. A lot has been going on. Not complaining. I love my job and my work and everything, but it's been very busy. I'm the associate director. Besides being a associate professor here at ASU, I'm also the associate director of the Center for American Institutions. And we have a lot of programming. We brought in GAD-SAD actually back in February. We have some student programming. We're doing a trip to DC fairly soon, taking some students. And but it requires a lot of spare time, which is fine. I love what we're doing. The mission of the center is to promote the institutions that are most requisite for American liberty and for a free society. And I've also been working on my second book, which is on the inflation of the continental dollar during the Revolutionary War. Actually became hyperinflation. It depreciated down to nothing by 1781. That's been great, but working hard on that. And then also I really wanted to finally begin this series on John Locke, which I've also been doing on this channel as part of the Foundations of Western Political Thought series. Proud of it so far. But John Locke, I encourage you to watch those videos if you're interested in political philosophy at all. Oh, and then, happy to announce, my wife is pregnant with our 5th child. It's a boy. His name is Constantine Rivbar Barth. And here's the 20-week ultrasound. This was the 14-week ultrasound. Strangely, it's actually 14-week. You can see it a little more clearly. But wow, just love the miracle of life. Gonna have a home birth. Our daughter Fern was born at home, and it was a really good experience. Really enjoyed that a lot. So anyway, you'll have to forgive me for not keeping up with these reports as often. But I hope that you enjoyed the one today, and I'll see you next time. Bye.